The paperwork came first, the way it always does. 3 weeks before the summit, a courier drone dropped a Halvorra compact agricultural classification form onto my kitchen table. 12 pages. The first 11 were standard transit documentation, livestock manifest, point of origin, intended use of animal during summit proceedings, quarantine history, feed composition, expected behavior under assessment. The 12th page was a pre-filled classification sheet. Someone in the Compact's biological taxonomy office had already looked up earth hamsters, found the relevant entry in their database, and stamped it. Class: 9 domesticated prey animal. Nutritional grade: tertiary. Behavioral hazard index: none. Recommended handling protocol: standard containment, no specialist intervention required. I read it twice. Then I looked at Pip, who was sitting in his will doing nothing at all, because it was Tuesday and Pip did nothing on Tuesdays. He was 4 years old, which is old for a hamster, and his fur had gone patchy behind his left ear. He weighed just over 100 grams. He had very small dark eyes that reflected light wrong, too steadily, like they were calculating something. I signed the form. It wasn't worth arguing with. The summit was held at Halvorra Station 9, in what the Compact called a diplomatic garden, a pressurized enclosure about the size of a tennis court, planted with something low and blue-green that wasn't grass but tried to be. The ceiling was transparent. The planet below was orange and enormous. I found it distracting. The other delegates, 2 from HFY and 1 from the Drevathi, seemed comfortable enough, which told me they'd done this kind of thing before. There were 9 of us in total. Farmers, mostly, or what passed for farmers among our respective species. A HFY agronomist with 4 arms and a careful, slightly skeptical face. A Drevathi keeper of something she called herd animals that I didn't ask about. 6 Halvorra delegates in the pale green robes that apparently meant administrative function. And me, Oren Baldek, 3rd-generation livestock farmer from a valley in southern Norway that nobody in the Compact had heard of, representing Earth's contribution to the summit's small livestock taxonomy panel. I had Pip in my breast pocket. He'd slept through the shuttle ride. The first morning was procedural. They read our credentials into the record, confirmed our species classification, cross-referenced our livestock manifest against the Compact's central database. The HFY agronomist had brought something in a sealed case that hummed quietly, and the Halvorra Assessors spent 40 minutes documenting it with visible enthusiasm. My contribution to the manifest: 1 Earth hamster, male, age 4, classification class 9, was processed in under 2 minutes. The lead assessor, a Halvorra woman whose name translated roughly to something like Veth around, read it into the record without looking up from her console. Class: 9 domesticated prey animal, she said. Behavioral hazard index: none. Standard containment: is the animal currently contained? I said he was in my pocket. She paused. She looked at me. Then she looked at my pocket. She made a small notation and moved on. The taxonomy assessment was scheduled for the afternoon of the second day. Each delegate was to present their animal for formal classification review, a live observation session, conducted in the diplomatic garden with a full panel present. The Compact wanted to update their livestock database with direct observational data, not just our filed paperwork. It was, they explained, an important step toward accurate cross-species nutritional and behavioral modeling. I noted they used the word nutritional twice in that sentence. When my turn came, I walked to the center of the garden. The panel was arranged in a shallow arc. Veth around at the center console, her 2 colleagues flanking her, the HFY and Drevathi delegates seated to the side as observers. The ceiling overhead showed the planet, slow and orange, turning. The blue-green ground cover was soft underfoot. There was a small table with a white surface for placing the animal during assessment. I set Pip on the table. He was warm from my pocket. He sat for a moment, blinking, getting his bearings. Then he tucked his nose down, sniffed the table surface twice, and settled into the low, compact sit that meant he'd decided the situation was acceptable and intended to stay put. His tail didn't move. His ears turned once toward the sound of Veth around's console and then stopped. She began to read the classification into the record. Earth hamster, common designation, PIP, male, approximately 4 standard years. Mass, 107 grams. Classification filed as class, 9 domesticated prey animal. Behavioral hazard index none. Recommended handling protocol, standard containment. She stopped. It was a clean stop, mid-sentence. Not a hesitation. A stop. I looked up. Veth around had gone very still. Her eyes were open. On her throat, just below the jaw, where Halvorra anatomy puts the stress-lattice, the cluster of sensory tissue that reads threat gradient from the air, from vibration, from whatever chemistry a predator carries that prey animals do not. Something had shifted. The tissue there was flushing pale. Both of her colleagues had gone the same color. None of them were looking at me. Pip yawned. It was a full yawn, the kind that showed his small incisors and curled his tongue. Then he closed his mouth, blinked once, and looked at the panel with a mild, incurious attention of an animal that has never in its life been afraid of anything and cannot imagine why it should start now. Nobody moved. I won't be precise about the timeline. The yawn took perhaps 2 seconds. After the yawn, there was approximately 45 seconds in which nothing happened at all. Veth around did not continue reading the classification. Her colleagues did not move. The HFY agronomist off to my left had pulled his forearms against his body in a way that looked involuntary. The Drevithi keeper had leaned back in her chair by about 20 degrees and was watching Pip with an expression I couldn't read, but which did not look like boredom. Then the 2 junior assessors stood up and left the garden. Not running, walking. Carefully, steadily, with their eyes still angled toward Pip, in a way that you keep your eyes on something when you want to track it without drawing its attention. The door closed behind them. I heard them stop just outside. I couldn't hear what they said. Veth around had not moved from the console. She was still looking at Pip. Her throat was still pale. Pip looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at me. Then he tucked his nose into his flank and went asleep. I picked him up, put him in my pocket, and said, "Should I come back tomorrow?" Veth around said, "Yes. Please. That'll be fine." The summit resumed the next morning as scheduled. The taxonomy panel was the same personnel, minus one of the junior assessors, who had apparently developed a scheduling conflict overnight. Veth around ran the session with normal efficiency. She did not reference the previous afternoon. Neither did I. The HFY agronomist sat slightly farther from me than he had on the first day, and I didn't think that was accidental. At the closing session, the Compact's chief taxonomy officer, a senior Halvorra official I hadn't met before, who had apparently arrived that morning from somewhere else, presented each delegate with their finalized classification certificate for entry into the database. Mine was the last one. The chief officer set it on the table in front of me without touching it more than necessary, and said, in a tone that suggested she was reading from a document that confused her, "Earth hamster, common designation PIP, male for year standard. Classification, pending further study. Transit status, Tier 1 accompaniment. No approach unescorted." She paused. "This is the highest accompaniment tier we have," she said. "It is typically reserved for compact bonded war auxiliaries." I said, "He's a hamster." She said, "Yes. That is noted in the file." There was a long pause. Neither of us added anything. Then she gave me a short, formal nod and moved to the end of the table. I flew home 2 days later. Pip slept through that, too. The shuttle, the transit hub at Corval 7, the long connector run to the Earth terminal. He woke up somewhere over the Atlantic, climbed to my shoulder, and sat there watching the seatback screen with the vague, patient attention he gave to everything. We landed in the early evening. The valley was cold. The goats were where I'd left them. That night, I filed Pip's new transit classification in the folder where I keep the farm documents, between the grazing rights permit and the vet records. The Compact sends an updated certificate every 18 months, which I understand they do not do for standard animals. I have never asked why the lattice fired. I have asked Pip in the rhetorical way you talk to animals that cannot answer, and he has given me the same response each time. The tucked nose, the slow blink, the deliberate arrangement of himself into sleep. He'll be 5 in March. His ear has gotten worse, the patchy spot. I put a warmer pad in the corner of his enclosure, and he uses it every night. The classification certificate is still in the folder. I have not framed it. It seemed like the kind of thing that would need explaining to visitors, and I don't have a good explanation. The compact does. They just haven't shared it.